crawls powered up on what is, at least in South Cheshire, as I said, a gloriously sunny day. Taz has just preempted my one piece of housekeeping, which was going to be to say that we're recording this session, may share it online, hopefully shouldn't inhibit the conversation too much, but please do, feel free to keep cameras off if that's something that, concerns you. We're not all kind of, like me, used to just kind of popping up on calls all over the place and just accepting my image will be used for any form of kind of purposes. So my name's Michelle. I'm the Planet Data lead here at Open Innovations, where I support sponsors and various projects related to net zero, and I'll be chairing this session today. For those who've not joined before, Powered Up is a session that we run on a quarterly basis. We're able to carve out time for kind of doing this sort of session, thanks to our sponsors, some of whom are here in the room today, such as Nadia from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And it's designed for a few key purposes. So firstly, inviting sponsors and friends to share what they're up to, helping to raise the awareness of projects, activities taking place, hopefully helping to reduce some of the unnecessary duplication of effort, providing people with a chance to see where they can collaborate, and providing chances to gain feedback and input and kind of, get some thoughts from others in the kind of wider community. We're also really keen that people get a chance to, explore any challenges they're facing and see if there's learning that you can kind of gain from others in the space. And then finally, just building connections and relationships. Lots of people are working on all sorts of things related to kind of technology and open data and climate. And by, providing space for people to kind of come together, collaborate, hopefully we can kind of, improve all of our impact and actually help us get towards kind of net zero, which is, as we've heard from kind of recent reports, really rather urgent for us to be looking at. So what I'm going to say is, although I'm chairing the session, please don't stand on ceremony. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll be keeping my eye open for anyone who doesn't feel able to kind of dive in and kind of share thoughts straight away, but please don't feel like you have to wait for me to invite you in before you kind of speak. And of course, the chat box is always open and we'll be kind of keeping an eye on that. So as I alluded to a minute ago, I think this feels like rather a well-timed session with the release of two key documents, at least in my mind, over the last few weeks. So firstly, IPCC report, stating that rather worryingly, it's almost inevitable that global temperatures will rise above 1.5 degrees C, the level at which climate breakdown becomes irreversible. And that temperatures rising above 3 degrees C is very likely unless policies and action are kind of rapidly strengthened, and that in order to do that, all sectors of the economy have to change. And then just after this as well, we had the UK's government energy security strategy, which, and I should say here, I'm not speaking on an Open Innovations behalf, but on my behalf anyway, really does appear to have ignored some quick wins on retrofitting and on insulation, which could help improve energy efficiency and, I think really importantly, help households to cut bills now. And a document, that strategy has also been kind of quite widely criticised for focusing on long-term expensive nuclear projects, perhaps at the expense of supporting cheaper onshore wind and solar projects. And so, we've got a space here we can explore some of that, can potentially explore how data might be used to help us look at the energy security strategy and help to deliver it. In terms of our plan for today, firstly, we'll do a kind of quick round of intros from everyone so we know who's in the room. We've got a couple of people who will talk a little bit about some of the projects that they're working on, which hopefully will lead into a bit of discussion. We'll see how that goes. And I should add, I think both of these people are incredible, so super happy that they're here. And then we'll wrap up with two things. We've got a talk from Matt Webb on the work that UK Power Networks is doing at present, the data they're making openly available, and hopefully a little bit on how you might be able to nudge energy companies in your area to think about publishing data more openly. And then we'll also make sure we've got space for anyone who wants to share any projects or activities that you're working on or want to promote. So that's kind of my plan for the next 50 minutes. Are there any questions about the format or what we're going to do? I'm going to take that as a no. So let's do a super quick round the room set of introductions. Just say who you are, any organisational affiliations you want to kind of share, and I think what you most enjoy doing with the lengthening evenings, just so we know kind of like what type of person you really are. So in terms of starting, I'm Michelle, as I said, Planet Data Lead, Open Innovations, and also chair of Open Data Manchester. In my evenings, well, I've recently, as I was saying, as people coming in, I love houseplants. You can probably see that. I've recently got into the outdoor gardening thing as well. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to work out how to make a garden that looks pretty, is really easy to look after and maintain, and really critically good for pollinators. So for the bees and butterflies and things like that. And it's not necessarily the easiest of kind of combinations to try and find, but fingers crossed I'll get there. So with that, Nadia, do you want to introduce yourself and say who you are?
Sure, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Nadia McPherson, and I work at the West Yorkshire Combine Authority. So yeah, very happy to be here. My role, sorry, I should have said my role. So I work in the Energy and Environment team within the policy department of the organisation. And I was just thinking, what do I do on an evening at the moment? So very much into outside gardening like you, Michelle, but at the moment I've just started to learn how to crochet. So I'm trying to crochet a little teddy bear for my brother's new baby. So that I thought would be quite easy to pick up. It's taken me quite a long time, but making progress. So that's taking up quite a lot of my time at the moment.
I'm no good at crochet or handiwork or anything. Like, you have my undying admiration on that one. Otla, is that how you pronounce your name? Do you want to first off correct me if that's needed, and secondly introduce yourself?
That was great. That was great. My name is Otla. Yeah. I am a service designer for a company that's called TPX. That is a collective of different organizations. You might have heard of FutureGov, that I was one of the organization. And I'm working with Connected Places Catapult on a project about net zero and a capability analysis to try to understand capabilities that are required in local authorities to deliver net zero. And we're working with different local authorities. We're kind of like doing deep dives with 3 main councils, and also doing a bit of like engagement with other councils. And one of them is Leeds. That's why we've been in contact with Open Innovations to try to organize some activities, as well as we will come up in a few weeks to Leeds. And we're also looking at kind of like engaging the councils, but also understanding more from the supply chain and the founders' perspective, how that works in Leeds, and some of the lesson learned basically in that area, and pretty much looking at kind of a place-based approach and attracting private fundings to deliver some of this. Long-winded explanation of this. Coming to what I enjoy doing, I'm an outdoor person and mainly into cycling, and it's great that now we are like longer day of flights, so enjoying getting out after work as well for bike rides.
Love it. Where I am in Cheshire, we've got lots of flat areas to go cycling on. I don't make as much as I should do, but maybe tonight I'll manage to get out. Yuxing, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, buddy.
So there, I guess a surprise, it's a dynamic duo. So I'm pleased to introduce Zach. So I'll start off first. My name's Yuxing, I'm the Open Data Manager at UK Power Networks. I won't go into too much detail of what I do. I think most of it will be covered by Matt Webb when he joins us. But in terms of what I like to spend time doing in the evening, spending time with my fiance, but that's an ominous description, so we'll just leave that there. Zach, over to you.
I am the Data Governance and Quality Lead at UK Power Networks as well. So Yuxing and I work closely together he makes the data open and I make sure it's reliable and good quality. So we work well together. And I also recently engaged, I don't know why that happened for us at some of the times, but so yeah, a lot of wedding planning at the moment, which is not as fun as it should be.
Some people here know I got married basically in a well, at our local registry office in a onesie, and all I'm going to say is that makes wedding planning much easier when it's literally 4 of you, all of you dressed in a onesie. But congratulations to everyone at UKPN on the engagements. That sounds, maybe there's something in the water over there at the moment.
Electricity. Yeah, all the electricity.
John from Safe House, did you want to give a couple of words introduction?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it's my first visit to this network. I'm John Griffiths. I'm CTO of a company called Secure Sensor Innovative Design, and we have developed a basically an operating system for IoT called Viper, software as a service for gathering IoT information. And why I'm here is recently we've been part of the Innovative Buildings Programme in the Welsh Government, and we're looking at electricity monitoring without using smart meters, basically getting a baseline for carbon inside the property, and then when the intervention comes in, seeing what difference that makes, and also indicating alterations in people's habits, such as how often or when you use the washing machine, tumble dryer and things like that, can actually make a big difference to your carbon footprint. We actually give kilowatt hours readings, but also we convert that to carbon, which people seem to find really quite interesting. Though having said that, with the recent bill increases, I'm not sure how long that's going to last, but I think they'll be reducing that. I live in Cardiff, and what I do in the evenings, I'm a commercial offshore yacht master, and most evenings I'm found on the boat sailing around here and racing.
Just going to say we're all sounding incredibly outdoors types here, other than with, you know, maybe with the exception of the UKPN team there. James Noakes from Belfast, did you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, let me figure out my camera, not that you're desperate to see me. So yeah, I'm James Noakes and I'm the City Innovation Broker in Belfast. So I work essentially on our Smart Belfast programme. That's kind of been overtaken a little bit by our city deal settlement. And so I've been focusing primarily on advanced wireless rollout in Belfast. So how can we roll out 5G across the city? Essentially much more difficult than we initially thought. But my background is in environmental issues and energy issues. So I was a sustainability manager over at Wigan for about 10 years. That's where I think first came across Paul. Hello, Paul. And for my sins, I was an elected politician in Liverpool, responsibility for climate change, etc. I keep saying to people that I left politics I left Liverpool to come somewhere where the politics was less contentious in Belfast, and it probably rings true as well. But in the evenings, I noticed not long ago that I was very rarely getting out of the house. I seem to be sat in this seat far too often. So I have tried to be getting out a lot more. When I do get out to watch the football, I do play a bit of football as well. Just to kind of, the flip side of maybe Michelle's life, I'm the one who has to go and fetch everything from B&Q and garden centres for my partner. So yeah, I'm a plant chauffeur, I think. So
I
yeah.
like it. So looking around, I'm going to come to Sharon next. If you wanted to kind of give us 60 seconds on who you are.
Yeah.
Please don't feel the need to if you don't want to, though, I should add.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. People, because I'm new to Leeds. In fact, I'm new to the UK. I have recently joined a PhD program with the Leeds Beckett University. It's sponsored by the Leeds City Council and in collaboration with the UK Green Building Council. So basically, I would be working on comparing retrofitting projects within the UK, with the EU, and evaluating the efficiency of the build-upon framework, with the objective, of course, of reducing carbon emissions within existing buildings through retrofitting to achieve the net zero. I'm presently based in the Middle East. I'm in Dubai, so I'm busy trying to, kind of juggle with my work as well as plan my, transition into Leeds. So, I like the outdoors, though of course it is not very much permitted here, considering the temperatures are like 40 degrees Celsius plus. So if I want to take a walk outdoors, I have to go at maybe 5 in the morning, just at the break of dawn. Otherwise, we do have a lot of outdoor activities indoors, which gives you a very artificial feel, but the facility is available. Though, of course, for the past month or so, I've been so busy with my PhD program. It's been very consuming, very interesting, considering the amount of work that is happening in the field and the repercussions of if we don't do it. So I haven't really had a lot of me time, but yes, looking forward to, some positive work happening and some positive results.
Great to have you with us. And 5 a.m. sounds far too early for me. I'm not gonna lie, not a morning person. Jordan, did you want to say anything at all?
Yes, hi. Hi, I'm Jordan. I am a data analyst for Connect Housing, housing association based in Yorkshire. And on an evening, I'm loving the extra hours of sunshine, walking, jogging, cycling. Built a raised bed recently in the back garden, so I'm going to start growing some peppers and onions and all sorts. Yeah.
More and more of us doing the outdoors thing. Mike, did you want to say anything quickly?
Hi, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think I'll just turn the camera on. Oh, that's not going to turn on. So I'm MD of Meniscus. So we do a lot of data analytics. We actually provide a lot of data to Leeds City Council for rainfall data, and actually a lot of that is some of that is open data. We also do quite a big project to deliver real-time solar intensity data for any location in the country. So we're doing that with using near real-time satellite imagery to help people to optimize battery use. So data analytics, number crunching, that's our thing. Evenings, gardening, fixing up old Land Rover and playing with that.
That's something I feel like I'm going to have to follow up with you about, because that's so wildly left field. Gaia, do you want to say just a couple of words quickly? Obviously you can introduce yourself a little bit more in a second, but coming to Plant Mum over there.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Gaia. I'm the program manager at Icebreaker One. And to keep this brief, in the evenings at the moment, I am either trying to get my pond that should be a water feature functioning in the garden, or climbing up the side of Avon Gorge. That's it.
Taz, Paul, Daniel, if we go Taz, Daniel, Paul, do you just want to kind of say what your role is at Open Innovations? And yeah.
Absolutely. I'm Taz. I'm a delivery manager at Open Innovations, and I recently worked on a project with the Connected Places Catapult, looking at the role of integrated planning for net zero. So I'm aware of the project that you've been working on, Otla, as well as the OSA project with Icebreaker One as well, which sounds really cool. So I'd be really interested to follow up about those. And in the evening, I have been tormenting my neighbours with music and really enjoy playing piano, which does have a volume button, and guitar, which doesn't have a volume button. So my neighbours unfortunately might not enjoy it quite as much as I do, but yeah, that is me.
Awesome. Daniel?
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm a data apprentice with Open Innovations. Yeah, I'm here just to listen in and be a backup recorder. I'd say in my evenings, I'll probably be watching football or kind of random YouTube videos, like such as people going on these straight line missions across Scotland or something like that. So watching people in the outdoors. Yeah, that's me.
And last but by no means least, Paul, do you want to say anything?
Hi everyone, welcome. Well, I'll use the same line I use all the time. Open Innovations is my fault. And in the evenings, pubs, bikes, music, gigs, doing stuff.
Fair enough, I like it. Definitely the bikes thing. I've not done as much in the way of kind of going to gigs for a while. I got out the habit of that with all things COVID. So as Paul said, thank you for joining, and thank you for providing a few kind of, words of introduction so we know who everyone is. Please do feel free to post links to projects and activities in the chat, and we can kind of all pick that up and kind of, go forth and explore. But I'd like to hand over to Nadia to start with, who's said she's just got a couple of words about one of the projects that she's been working on. So Nadia.
Yeah, sure.
No further ado, over to you.
Thank you. And sorry, this is going to be quite short because we just exchanged an email yesterday, didn't we, Michelle? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll tell people about a program, but I've only sort of yeah. But basically, so I started a new position at the Combine Authority in sort of December time. And that's to work on a new program that we're developing called Net Zero Region Accelerator. And I don't have a link to share at the moment, but hopefully in the coming months I will, and so I can share that with you. But basically, to give people a quick, and I'm sure everyone's sort of familiar with the situation, but to give people a quick flavour of kind of what's going on in West Yorkshire, and it's good to have quite a few people on this call from Leeds, so I'll reach out, and feel free to reach out to me as well. So basically, the Mayor of West Yorkshire and the West Yorkshire Combine Authority declared a climate emergency, and we've got a target to be net zero carbon by 2038. So just to kind of give you the regional picture, very conservative estimates of the finance required for us to get there. We had a consultant kind of put a very loose figure on it, and it was up to 4.4 billion, but in reality we expect it will be much more significant than that. That's a really sort of conservative estimate. So I guess the thinking at the Combine Authority in the last sort of year or so, there's an acceptance that we can't continue to rely on public money to fund this sort of activity that needs to take place. However, on the flip side, in order to attract private finance, we need to sort of demonstrate sufficient investment-ready projects in a single coordinated pipeline. So hence, to address these barriers, we've got the Net Zero Region Accelerator programme being launched. So myself and my colleague, Neil Johnson, who's on leave this week, otherwise I'm sure he'd attend, have been brought into the team at the Combine Authority to lead on this programme. And essentially what we're trying to do is establish a pipeline of these projects for West Yorkshire that tackle the climate and environment emergencies, support projects with business case development, so helping them to get to a stage where they are investment ready. So myself and Neil's time, because often we get told, particularly local authorities, they might have a great project idea, but they just don't have the time to dedicate to kind of working up the business case. So we are here as a resource. We also have a small revenue budget available. It's about 260,000. So we would love it to be larger, but it's better than nothing, to pay for sort of bespoke consultancy support when and if required, like legal, specific technical support, things like that. And then once the projects are investment ready, we are one of our objectives is to publish an investment prospectus to showcase the region's opportunities and our market strengths. That's probably all I can say at the moment. I'd love to be able to give you timescales, but we're just kind of figuring things out internally at the moment. But in terms of the investment prospectus, our vision is to be on our website, to be sort of live, constantly updated when projects need to be added and removed and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what we're working on. There's a lot going on at the Combine Authority other than that, but I don't want to take up too much time. It'll be really interesting to hear about what's going on in other with other colleagues as well. But I'm happy to chat about it further. If anyone has a particular interest and wants to, feel free to just add me on LinkedIn. That might be the best option, or I'll put my email in here as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Nadia. Did anyone have any questions on what Nadia just shared? Sharon, you're not on mute, so I'm not sure if that's a I want to ask a question or not.
No.
Can I ask a quick question on what you were just saying? This is exactly what we're looking at and exploring at the moment. I'm wondering, what is the scale that you're looking at, in a sense of like how are the projects and the portfolios and the perspectives kind of like grouped?
Yeah, it's a good question. So me and Neil have differing views on this, so it's still to be determined. So I'd be interested in hearing people's views on this. My gut feeling was that we want scale. So we often get told by the investment community that, you know, they want scale. So I was recently on a UK infrastructure bank call, and I think they were sort of looking at minimum 50 million from memory, but I don't have my notes to hand. However, we're also very conscious that we want to be able to support small community projects. And I guess the argument for not having that minimum value so high is that you can then aggregate those projects to get the scale. So I think to start with, we're kind of wanting to be open to all sorts of projects of all values, to help them develop. Whether they make it onto the prospectus or not, I guess, is for us to decide further down the line. And in terms of thematic areas, because you mentioned kind of what sorts of projects, so we do a lot at the Combine Authority around transport. We are sort of a transport organisation, but we've got teams set up that are not the team that I sit within. So we're not going to have a massive focus. There may be some transport projects in it, but that's kind of being led by another team. So predominantly focusing on sort of buildings, natural capital and energy generation.
James has been incredibly polite and put his hand up.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is more like almost a philosophical question, I suppose, but I'd be interested in your opinion. There's a lot of kind of political intentions. We will reach net zero by X year, etc. And I'm concerned that the investment process, the identifying of projects, etc., and the knotty details of dealing with it, especially when you look at things like private residential, etc. I'm wondering whether they're aligned at all. And we're talking an awful lot about what investments need to come forward, but they're not going to be implemented or even started in time to meet those net zero declarations that people have made. I can see people nodding sagely. I don't know whether it's just like, yeah, we kind of all know this, it's the elephant in the room kind of thing.
I think so, yeah. I think I would agree with everything that you're saying. I guess it's one of those that you have to sort of start somewhere and start chipping away at it. I mean, I know working in a public organisation, there are just certain, it takes a long, we're not able to just complete projects at the click of a finger, although we would love to, because it's a climate emergency. We have to work through our assurance process and develop robust business cases. So it does take time. And I don't think there's a way to sort of, I guess we're doing some things internally to try and speed up our assurance process, like running things in conjunction to try and do things as quickly as we can. And also, I guess picking off there's no easy projects, but the more simple projects that we do have a route to delivery on.
I'm just, Greater Manchester's Mini Stern was 14 years ago. It's kind of, so, I mean, I know there's a sense of kind of, well, politics has caught up to a certain degree. But yeah, I'm just concerned about, we've set ourselves targets which we're probably not going to meet. I don't want to sound pessimistic at that. I'm still ever optimistic that things will get better, but yeah, there's just that concern sitting there.
I think a lot of people share that concern and have spoken to quite a few local authorities in different places, with people perhaps admitting slightly privately that they're not totally comfortable about certain things.
I will say one thing. There's that, and I've been talking to a few people about this recently, that I think something that's gonna, it feels to me like it's gonna have a bit of a domino effect, is the climate related financial disclosures that now kind of major banks and insurance companies are signed up to. Interesting that it came through Mark Carney and was kind of backed by Michael Bloomberg as well. And that's a kind of, so any of the investment decisions made by those major banks and insurance companies, or any of the underwriting decisions, they have to identify what their climate risk is and how it affects their business. Now, I can see that the next stage of that may not necessarily need legislation. It's just the way the market will move. If you're a major bank and you're looking at those investment decisions, who are you going to ask about that risk? It's going to be those that you invest in. So, and that will trickle down in some shape, way or form towards pretty much anyone who wants to borrow.
So do you think you could kind of ping a link or two into about that into the chat for anyone who's not aware of it?
Yeah,
brilliant.
It is kind of, I mean, it's good and everything, but there's a lot to read through. Got to be honest, I've been trying to get through it, but yeah, there's some. It's really useful. But I'll put it in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. And so Gaia was also going to say a couple of words about the incredible stuff going on at Icebreaker One. Would you still like to get?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So as I mentioned before, I'm the co-founder and the program manager at Icebreaker One. And for those of you who have not seen me before, I know there are some familiar faces on here, but for those of you who've never heard of us, Icebreaker One is an independent, non-partisan non-profit that is working to make data work harder to deliver net zero. And so we're doing that by creating a web of net zero data. Specifically, we're trying to connect financial, engineering, and environmental data to help inform net zero decisions. So a lot of the stuff that's been talked about today. But a lot of this data is restricted. So what we're doing is we're enabling that web by creating policies and guardrails that ensure that data is comparable, machine readable, and trusted. And to achieve this, we're working across industries and governments. So Open Energy is our flagship program, where we're working with industry to develop a service that makes it easy to search, access, and securely share energy data. And by developing open standards and through this collaboration, we're helping to bring together data that's held by thousands of organizations and unlock sector-wide innovation. But in addition to this, we're also doing a couple of other bits that have been touched on today. Also, so one of the things we're doing at the moment is working with SSE on Nimbus. It's in the discovery phase under the Strategic Innovation Fund that I think some of you will have heard of. It's a kind of joint program between UKRI and Ofgem. And what we're doing there is we're aiming to revolutionize the way that detailed meteorological data and models are used in the design and decision-making of electricity assets. That's coming to a close next week, and then we're going for alpha. Exciting times. And then we've also been running something that we call an ice-breaking process, which is a kind of use case identification and problem solving process with OZEV. And we're specifically focusing on-street EV charge point rollout. So there'll be a workshop on that next week. So yeah, get in touch if any of these things sound interesting, or if you'd like to find out more. I'm just going to post a quick link in the chat and hand back to Michelle. Open questions, of course.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, is that workshop next week open to anybody who's interested? Is it expression of interest, or are you full already?
It's pretty full. We are looking for DNO and local authority representation potentially. I would have to check with the team who is running it. But if any DNOs on here are interested in joining, and or a local authority that happens to perhaps be based in Wales and is focused on EVs,
cough, cough. Yes.
Cough, cough, hint, hint. But if you are interested, get in touch and I'll speak to the team.
Brilliant. Were there any questions for Gaia about Icebreaker One and all of the things going on over there? Sounds like not, given a lot of people are super willing to dive in and share. So Matt Webb, are you there, my dear?
I am, just can't come off mute. Hello, how are you?
Hello, lovely to have you and UKPN with us as well. These things been, flying the good flag, and has told us that kind of basically everyone seems to be getting engaged at UKPN. But I was super keen to kind of hand over to you, give you a bit of a chance to talk a little bit about the work that UKPN is doing at the moment on all things open data and things like that.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, I'll apologise. I'm not sat in a phone box. It's one of these weird booth things. It's one of the only quiet spaces you can get. So hopefully it works. I will try and bring up some slides that will at least spare you having to look at my face for the next 10-15 minutes. So bear with me while I try and get that to work. Shout if you can't see. I can't even get my screen to work myself. That's even worse.
Can see slides.
It's always the technology, isn't it, that confuses things. So can you see that in full screen mode?
Yes.
Success, great. Okay, so introduction first of all. So Matt Webb, Head of Enterprise Data Management at UK Power Networks. We at UK Power Networks, along with pretty much every other participant with the energy sector, is responding to an increasing need to openly publish our data. And we like to think that we have sort of been at the forefront of this for the last 18 months, 2 years, and had a degree of success. And Michelle just asked me to come along to give a bit of insight into what we've been doing and how we've approached it. Please do feel free to ask questions or throw stones as we go through. We are still learning, it's fair to say, and we've got a lot of experts on the call, so any feedback or input is really, really appreciated. So first of all, in terms of the drivers behind energy data, so clearly we've got other network operators on here. We've got Icebreaker One with Gaia there, very much active in this space. And to a large extent, we're responding to something called the Energy Data Task Force that hopefully most of you have got a degree of familiarity with, but basically a government commissioned group that was tasked with looking at how we can accelerate digitalization within the energy sector. So that was kind of the stick that prodded action. As much as there's been a degree of data publication and sharing across the sector, we've never really been in that true open data space. So the series of recommendations that came out of the Energy Data Task Force report was the catalyst. In terms of our response to that, we have putting a very broad strategy around digitalization in data in general, but open data is very much at the core of that. And a really important document that we published last year is what you see on the screen here, Open Data Principles and Approach. So the 6 points here are really the key tenets of what we're trying to aspire to, really. So first of all, be as open as possible, kind of a given if you're trying to be open. Deliver benefits for our customers and stakeholders, and I'll sort of build upon that more as we go through, but that's probably the most important thing for how we're trying to approach this. Is not us being ivory tower and assuming what people want to need. We're very keen to understand and respond to that. By extension, we want to gain the trust and confidence of our stakeholders, both in terms of the fact that we are being very transparent in how we go about opening up our data, but also the confidence in the data itself. We need to be open and upfront about the fact we don't have perfect data, but we don't want that to be a constraining factor that really limits us pushing the data out there. Clearly, there's the sensitivities and associated risks that can come with publishing data. So protection of privacy and security is something that we have been very keen to call out right the way through, and there's certain complexities that are not unique, but are certainly quite strongly there for the energy sector, which I can touch upon shortly. Providing sustainable open data services, we don't want this to be a flash in the pan. We want it to be an enduring capability that will last ad infinitum. And finally, the facilitation and collaboration of open innovation. Ultimately, it's about how we recognise ourselves as part of a broader ecosystem and enable that broader activity. And I'll send the slides to Michelle afterwards, and there's a link there that if you want to access that document, you are more than welcome to. So our community. So I spoke about that stakeholder piece. One thing that we were very conscious of, as I said, is not to be first of all, speculative in what we openly publish, but also base what we do on presumption and assumption. We've undertaken a huge amount of stakeholder engagement through a range of forums right across the piece, critically not to just establish one-way traffic, us pushing out data and probably being fairly ignorant as to what's happening with it. It's important to us that we understand, first of all, the need and the value proposition, but also to then get insight into the real world application of it, because that will help inform whether we're doing the right things in the right way. Are people able to access, consume and use the data effectively? And, is the theoretical value that we perceived in the first instance that was articulated, is that actually materializing? Because that obviously helps us to understand, are we giving our stakeholders what we need, but also to build the internal business case about why we need to do this, scale it, increase and evolve over time. So really simply, the diagram on the right is trying to articulate that. So what you could have is, rather than two or bi-directional arrows from UK Parent Networks out to our stakeholder community, that could just be one way. We want there to be to and fro, but equally as important, we want there to be collaboration and sharing between participants themselves. So if a stakeholder consumes our data, uses it and applies it in a certain way where they're realizing value, we think there's huge benefit to be had by sharing that openly themselves, so that it isn't just a discrete silo in terms of application. So it helps it inform others about the potential of the data, might make them more aware of what's there, but really drive that expansion and sort of snowball effect that you can and should achieve through open innovation. So the community is very much about communication in multiple directions, not just the outward flow of data. And it's early doors in reality. We've, as I said before, had quite significant engagement on a number of fronts, but we are starting to see sort of green shoots in that respect, with consumers coming to us saying, they value what we've done so far. They've put it to good use and given us that demonstration. In one or two cases, we've been able to publicise that jointly with them to show how they've effectively used that within their own product, services and solutions. And for that's really, really important, because it does mean that open data stops being this slightly theoretical thing to demonstrating tangible value, not just to ourselves, but the wider energy ecosystem. In terms of the community, the diagram on the right here is something that we developed early on in the engagement to try and map out the ecosystem that we're trying to serve. And you can see from this that as much as there's certain groupings, it's quite diverse. And when you think about their specific needs, they become increasingly complex in some instances, but also that diversity is exponential. So there's a bit of a challenge really in terms of that prioritization, where we're clearly not going to be able to publish everything at once that meet everyone's needs, but where is there greatest value to be achieved, and is there a bit of a Pareto principle we can apply in terms of a critical mass of data meets the broad needs? And effectively what I've got on the left hand side of those bullet points is very much oriented around that. So irrespective of where on that ecosystem map the stakeholder falls, there's a lot of commonality at headline level in terms of what assets do we have, where are they located, so the geospatial aspect really comes into it, how they are connected, what sites are linked to what circuits feed from what locations, and the corresponding area of supply, their capacity and utilization. So from a network planning, design and access point of view, that is absolutely key, and ultimately most people are interested in that. They want to connect to our network either through generation or supply. And if there's a constraining factor there that's going to mean it's difficult for them to access because it's a long way away, or they need to reinforce and invest and there's additional cost, that's kind of the heart of what most people are interested in. The nature of any constraining factors, such as constrained capacity. And then finally, any planned investments and intervention. So if a circuit has reached its capacity, what have we got in our pipeline of investments in 5, 6, 7 years time that will increase that to allow people to have their own long-term planning to say, okay, I've got a site, for instance, that I want to build generation on. It's not viable now, but in 6, 7 years time, once the investment takes place, it opens those doors. So, this is where there's very, very strong tie into net zero and those national, international objectives, because as a network operator, at the core of what we need to do is facilitate connection of low carbon technologies. So this is how open data links through to that. It's by giving that insight, that self-serve capability, and the unlocking, if you like, of the data that allows people to be proactive in deploying their own resources, systems and solutions. In terms of what we publish, so in October of last year, we launched an open data portal. So the reality is the energy sector at large has published and exchanged data in various shapes and forms for a long, long time. However, we have not done it in the most effective, efficient, user-friendly way, and certainly not in a manner that satisfies the hardcore requirements of open data. So the development of the open data platform that we put in place effectively consolidates what's already there to a large extent, augments it by improving the level of interaction you can have with that data, the level of insight in terms of contextual metadata, but also the ability to download a number of different formats. So trying to cater for the vast spectrum of capabilities that exist across that stakeholder community. So as we stand, we have 34 data sets, over 5,000 users of the platform, and at latest count, well in excess of 914,000 calls on that data. So, you know, we are seeing a consistent and also consistently growing utilization of that data, which is fantastic, because there was always a question mark of, is there really demand there? And the short answer is yes, there is. Then the table on the right hand side, it was just a bit of insight into the types of data sets we have, and they ultimately link back to those previous bullet points. A lot of what you see here was already in circulation to a greater or lesser extent. There's certain things where we've disaggregated them to make them more consumable and, you know, more targeted towards particular stakeholders. And the way we present it is done in a way that really allows you to interact and gain insight from the data direct from the platform, but as I said before, the ability to also consume it into your own systems and processes and to gain your own insight for analysis. So in terms of challenges and obstacles that we've had to overcome for this journey, though, this list could have been a lot longer, but invariably, as I should expect, they come under three key headings: cultural, legal and regulatory, and technical. So as a network operator, and I think for the energy industry as a whole, we're relatively slow moving, naturally quite risk averse. So when you start talking about opening things up, it demands a bit of a mindset change. So start at the top of the organization. Open data, again, can be quite a theoretical thing. And when you're there thinking about operating critical national infrastructure and keeping people's lights on, publishing data can seem a little bit, you know, or a long way down the order of priorities, let me put it that way. You can then combine that with risk aversion. And this second bullet point, I think, is really, really key, trying to change the mindset from a position of why would we share to why wouldn't we? So the Energy Data Task Force set the principle of presumed open, which I think is very much angled towards this. It's having your starting point from the positive end of the spectrum rather than negative, the closed aspect. So, you know, we've certainly been on that journey for a couple of years now, and things are moving along. And really, it's through demonstrating the level of interest and use of the Open Data Portal, and then in addition being able to demonstrate the actual application of the data that's really changing that. And the third point there around internal possessiveness over data, that shouldn't be underestimated, how strong those silos and that tribe mentality could be around data. Data is power for a lot of people. And when you start talking about making it open, even internally with an organization, can be a challenge. So exposing it internally can, you know, be a tough one to overcome. So again, our engagement has had to focus quite heavily on that. The legal and regulatory piece, I mentioned earlier that there are certain aspects of what we do in the energy sector that are perhaps slightly unique. So the fourth bullet point here in particular, Section 105 of the Utilities Act, is a really good example of how old legislation doesn't quite marry up with contemporary principles and ambitions. So without getting too dull in the detail, this basically is a limitation that prevents us from surfacing data that allows you to identify the commercial interests of an individual organization. So say you're a generator connected to the network, we need to be careful that we don't expose somebody that gives people insight into, you know, what they export, the value and revenue and so on and so forth. So when you then tie that in with, we want to release data about our network, we need to be cognizant of those things. So there are those inherent risks of those types of aspects. And again, the liability, ownership, all these different things that cut across the piece, you know, they certainly apply to us, especially in the context of critical national infrastructure and that what if scenario. We put some data out there that falls in the wrong hands, they misuse it, target our network and cause, you know, adverse impacts to sort of broader society in some way, shape or form. All of those things we need to consider through what we call our triage process, effectively a risk assessment of what we share, and how we can mitigate those risks. And then the final piece around technical. So I mentioned earlier that data quality, our data is not perfect, surprisingly. But we are very keen for that not to be a limiting factor. We recognise that by pushing data out there, there is a reciprocal value in helping to surface issues and iron them out. That said, we're not going to push something out there that's so bad it's not useful and has a risk with it. So again, we need to have that understanding. Application programming interfaces. Everybody talks about APIs and the solution to all problems, and in this arena they certainly do. But it's an area that we don't have a mature capability in as an organisation. Really, we use it in very discrete ways. We've been fortunate with the platform that we've used to facilitate the platform. There's a native capability in there, so we've been able to accelerate very rapidly there, and it's a capability we need to extend further. Metadata, a very, very technical space that there's a lot of emphasis put on it. Again, we are not mature when it comes to defining and utilising metadata, so we're still very much in the infancy of that learning curve. And then cybersecurity issues in terms of the architecture about how we push data out. Is it controlled? Once it's open, it kind of goes out the window slightly, but there's still a lot of questions asked in terms of, okay, once we're sharing data in particular between certain firewalls, have we got the right controls and security protocols that limit that? So as I said, there are many, many more things I could have spoken about here, but I don't think any surprises, but they're the things that we've had to overcome over recent months and years. So to close off, in terms of future development, we see the development of the open energy community as a continual thing. It's something we want to grow and expand, and it to be quite organic, really, especially when you talk about that interaction between the stakeholders and the communities themselves. We've got a long way to go on that, but I hope that is something that will develop. We'll continue with what we describe as the retrospective, reactive and proactive publication of our data, rounding up what's already out there and improving it, being reactive and responding to stakeholder needs, but also started to be a little bit more speculative and explorative in terms of what we publish. Continuous improvement of our services, as you'd expect. We need to increase standardization and interoperability. So the interoperability piece is very, very important in the energy sector and in terms of the whole system between different infrastructure, because the interoperability at an asset level is increasing, so therefore the interoperability of the data that cuts across those needs to keep pace to give us the insight, the control, and the overall optimization of the network that corresponds with that. Open publications of our processes, methodologies, research and performance. So this is something that sits within our principles, where the learnings, what we do, how we do it, the solutions that we put in place, we don't want to keep to ourselves. The energy sector is on a learning curve here, and we are part of that community. So we're trying to be as open as possible in sharing what we do and allowing people to utilize it as they see fit, not just publishing the data alone. And then finally, that ongoing coordinated collaboration with our peers and stakeholders, that value-driven, stakeholder-led approach is key, is core, and will continue to be. So clearly we need to maintain that focus. I think, yes, that was me done. And I'll stop for breath.
I was wondering at one point how you were breathing during that, and thanks for sharing all of the work that UKPN has been doing over the last kind of year or so. Did anyone have any questions for Matt on the work that UKPN and the team are doing?
Just a quick one from me, and this is, excuse my ignorance, I should probably know what's going on in my region, but so in our patch, we've got Northern Power Grid, and I was just wondering, it sounds like there's some great work going on at UKPN, and I was just wondering whether it would be like correct to assume that something similar will be going on up here, or is it, you did kind of say that you sort of see yourselves as leading the charge in a way, so are other power networks kind of behind?
I think it's fair to say there's variation, as you'd expect across the different organisations. We have been particularly proactive in this space. I think we're not alone in that respect. So you look at the likes of Western Power Distribution, for instance, that covers the South West, the Midlands and Wales. Similarly, transmission level National Grid, they, for instance, have published their data portals. I'm going to sit here and be arrogant and say I think ours is the best, but I'm obviously very, very biased. But yeah, the key thing is that we've got different levels of maturity across all aspects of digitalization in the sector, and open data is part of it. Others will be more advanced when it comes to interoperability of data and application of something called a common information model that exists within the industry. Digitalization of our records, for instance, UK Parent Networks is the back of the queue, where we haven't got a fully digitalized map of our network, and we're investing in that. So we're all at different positions in terms of these different aspects. I think, yes, we are more at the forefront here. NPG are, I believe, still developing in this space. But what we do have is through the Energy Networks Association, which is made up of all gas and electricity operators at both transmission and distribution level. We have the digitalization data steering group, which is really easy to say, which is there to drive that coordinated collaboration to move us all forward at much the same pace, hopefully, in meeting those recommendations, those objectives set by the likes of the Energy Data Task Force and so on. So there is variation, but we're all very much on the same journey.
And I'm aware we're a couple of minutes over, but did anyone have any other comments or questions that they wanted to throw Matt's way?
Just a quick one. You kind of answered it just there, Matt. So from our project with CPC, sort of some of the feedback that came back from local authorities was that, you're talking about sort of keeping the stakeholder in mind, and like how much do you communicate with local authorities in the process, and do they have much of a feedback on that? And yeah, I was similarly going to say, and how much sort of communication happens between DNOs to try and sort of coordinate, which you sort of answered there.
Yeah, so yes, there's significant engagement with the local authorities in particular. This last quarter, we actually had a dedicated engagement event with local authorities on the subject of open data to understand their wants and needs. Given that there's such a diversity amongst the local authority community, that translates into the data needs as well. So we're navigating through that, but beyond the data team, the open data activities, there's obviously much broader activity or engagement with the local authorities as well. So what we're making sure we do is we're coordinated as a business internally across all those different facets of why and when we need to engage. So we're more streamlined rather than hitting the same people, the same questions time and time again. So yes, there is that relationship. It very much informs what we're doing. So a development that we've got in the pipeline for Open Data Portal is trying to package up a suite of data sets that local authorities can access in bulk, so they're not having to go in and pick and choose what they want. It's kind of geared up for what they want to give them the insight they need based on their locality. So yeah, they're a very important piece of the puzzle in terms of their need to develop local area energy plans and so on. So it's very much the heart of what we do. In terms of the second part of your question, the alignment and coordination between networks is improving, is what I would say, and the DDSG has a role to play in that. But clearly, we, to a certain degree, have always been incentivized to compete as much as we're regulated monopolies. It's driven us to be slightly more solid than we need to be, and that's starting to change and evolve. So we're trying to share those learnings and insights and how to serve those customers more consistently.
Yeah, and like you said, there's going to be a lot of variation between local authority regions as well as much as there is variation between DNOs and kind of awareness and use of the data as well.
Just seeing James's comment there, just to let you know that NIE and ESB, the two electricity network operators in Ireland, are also part of the network community that are involved in this. So, there should be changes in Belfast as well.
So I'm going to draw a line under it there. Thank you, because we've run a bit over, but that seems like a useful exchange. I'm just going to say thank you ever so much for kind of joining us today, sharing thoughts, sharing projects. If you want to get in touch with me to provide any links, I will make sure we then post all of that out with a thank you and wrap up email via Eventbrite later on this week. So go forth, enjoy your afternoons, go do whatever you do you, have a great time, and we'll be back again here in the next quarter. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.